delicate dance for me as a writer, because there are certain things. First of all, there's just like loyal. You can't really be I can't be as gruff and frank as I'd like to be. I'll give you an example. I recently wrote a column about people running for mayor and about how there are all these guys who were, didn't have a chance. And one of them came to a reading that I gave at Whittier College and threatened me and harassed me and got in my face and called me names and then walked away. And I felt really stunned, because sort of like I'm not used to being threatened with violence and being called horrible names, And then I thought, what did I write that really made this guy so mad? And what I had done, my sin was that I had described him as wearing a loose-fitting suit. So when you write in a newspaper, it's like talking to somebody almost. I could say something that my private thoughts about the person I'm talking with, and then imagine me blurting it out in the middle of a conversation. That's sort of like, it's a conversation that's ongoing. There are people who, they're in the city. It's a different sort of relationship. There's that. Then there's the whole demands of the newspaper as, how should I put it? It's really, it's sort of like basic reader. Its most common denominator reader is a person living west of La Cienega, with a college education, who is in that minority of people who now are of only of European descent. That's sort of like, that's what the reader is. And so I am like someone telling stories from the rest of the city to them, because they're really the people who make up most of the readership. And so I feel sometimes like I'm really still a foreign correspondent, sort of describing Los Angeles to the people who live there. And so there's that. And then there's finally, I have to be honest here on the iPod, I am a lifelong believer in social equality. I am a lifelong believer in the power of working people and democracy and things like that. I really can't say that. I mean, I can't say that in print. I can't, especially now being the Latino columnist. A lot of people have been calling me that, the de facto Mexican columnist, even though I'm not even Mexican, right? I just feel that I have to sort of tread carefully. And so, but at the same time, I approach writing as a craft. Writing is what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about the word, metaphor, symbolism, irony, all these things. And yet, I have to sort of obey certain rules, and I'm trying to reinvent the rules as I go along, And so I think what I'm proudest of in my career is having taken not just the column, but journalism and this sort of the rules of what daily journalism should look like, and to have done some things that were mildly subversive, or to have created a body of work, and not just me, but other people who are of my generation, to have created a body of work that sort of subverted certain stereotypes about Los Angeles or about immigrant people or about poor people, and and also to have illuminated a little bit about Los Angeles history. And so I sort of look at that work as something I'm proud of, but at the same time as something that's not really mine. Not only that, but the Los Angeles Times does own the copyright on everything I've written. So that's why I don't know if anything will ever come out about that. So, other questions? Yes.
A while back, and during the theater exercise one day, a young day laborer, Hector, just explodes out of the blue during this exercise, and it turns out he used to be a Death Squad member for the Guatemalan Army.
Oh, wow.
So very crazy and powerful on the trip, but so my question is, I found the character that Antonio finally, gets his revenge on.
Yes.
I find him very sympathetic.
Sergeant Longoria, yes.
Yeah, so my question is, how conscious were you of making him sympathetic, or how sympathetic are you to that character?
Yeah, that was sort of the biggest surprise to me of writing that book, is that I had a killer inside of me. I could make a believable killer. The whole reason for the success of the novel is that I made a believable killer. And I think that he stands for, there are some elements of me in him, which is that he is intolerant of, he's intolerant of imperfection, Even though he's from a very poor village, he was drafted into the army, he sort of came to believe this ideology of order that the American advisors sell to him. So there's that I think I tapped into that vein when I created him. At the same time, I sort of have this lifelong, not lifelong, but a long fascination with the Holocaust. And so I had read a lot of Holocaust literature. And just by pure coincidence, the editor who bought The Tattooed Soldier had just edited a book, had previously edited a book about about German police being involved in executions. And it was a historical study of how certain German police squads had been drafted to commit executions. And it was a study of their rationalizations. How was it that these civil servants can rationalize to themselves committing massacres? And I thought this was an incredibly fascinating book. And that all of that sort of material and the whole Nazi experience became something that I drew on to create Longoria. So that's why the first thing I wrote of him is him scrubbing the floor of his room, because there was this whole Nazi fetish with cleanliness. And then there was this whole metaphor that they constructed of killing the Jews to purge the body of this contamination. And of course, that is something that's, I think, universal to fascist ideologies, right? So that metaphor, that imagery had its own logic, right? That was like, wow, I could really tap into this. But you really can't create somebody without getting to know them as a human being and making them a human being. And I think it wasn't my intention when I first started creating him to making him sympathetic, but I sort of found myself identifying with more and more of his worldview, and I think that's what made it a strong novel, because really it isn't the evil isn't in there is evil in some of the individuals who commit these atrocities, but really it's the whole system of rationalizations that allows them to commit those atrocities that really is the horrible, ugly thing, and that's what happened with me and Sergeant Longoria in my creation of him. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, just about to both yourself and the doctors, that are also authors, for writing the kind of stories that our young people need to know, as you say, so that we won't forget some of the struggles. Mm-hmm. And also, there are so many untold stories, especially when you talked about LA being an imperial city, and maybe more about those particular raised areas, mm-hmm. and then what has come about, before that and then after that. If there's ever been any justice for the people, who were the victims. Because I think there's a lot of myths about what happened and about banks and, what have you. And so I hope that others, will there's so many stories, and so it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming to UCLA.
Oh,
I know
you.
that for myself, my daughter's a second-generation Blue,
mm-hmm.
and we need to have all of the young people also know.
Well, our history has become a lot more complicated, I think, even in the time since I started writing, because now, we have elected representatives, or we have some institutions, and so it requires more of us to write it and to tell it. I definitely can see that. I feel like I did something really almost something that it was like a prehistory of this community that's being born. So. Yeah. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.